Thank you. That was wonderful. Let's hear it again for Stephanie Ann Johnson. It's an oldie but a goodie. Good morning. This is God. I will be handling all your problems for you today, and I will not need your help. So have a good day, God. Wouldn't you like to read that every morning and to hear that every morning? That was from Joyce Meyer, where this releasing, this letting go, this being in the moment and surrendering to God. So this month, we are covering the practice of packing lightly and letting go. And we're basing this year's theme on the book, The Soul of the Pilgrim, which we have in the bookstore by Christine Valters Paintner, which you've been hearing a lot of her poetry. So last week we talked about the importance of packing lightly for a trip and for life, that life is much easier when we're not bogged down with a lot of possessions, that our suitcases are heavy. And also that we need to begin to release possessions in our lives. And one of the tasks that we've been called to do is try giving just one thing away a week. Just try being in that place of releasing and letting go. Because as a community, we are in the process of releasing and letting go. And it is a process that we go through. So change, even when it's change that you want, can be stressful. And last week, I was speaking about this, and Heather, I don't know if Heather is here, but she has a little girl, Emma, who's like 3, and they came up to me after the service, and they said, we were just talking about change and about letting go because we watched the first episode of Mr. Rogers on YouTube, the first episode ever, and she said, you really need to watch it because it's about change and letting go, so I did. And Mr. Rogers, in his Mr. Rogers way, talked about change, so he rearranged the furniture in his little place, and then he visited a friend who wore lamp shades for hats, and then she'd turn them upside down and say, see, look, this changes, this is different, and then put a flower on it. And then he went to the neighborhood of make-believe where all the little puppets were, only they had taken the castle and totally moved it around so much that the king puppet would not come out and talk to Mr. Rogers because he was too crabby and he was too upset by all the changes that have happened. Do you ever find yourself crabby and upset over some of the changes that you may experience in life, and maybe you don't want to come out of your castle and you don't want to talk to anybody? If things don't go as they should or look as they might. And again, part of the process that we talked about again last week, a part of the transition is to be willing to honor whatever it is you're feeling. That there's 3 stages in a transition, and the first one is the ending, the second is the place that's in between, and then the third is the new beginning. And every single stage is extremely important. One of the things that I've learned while I was traveling is that things don't always work out as planned, right? And anyone who has traveled or been anywhere, right? I mean, you don't know what the weather is, if the weather's going to cooperate with you, if your plane is going to be on time, if your train is going to be on time. And the thing is that when we can surrender to these moments, then maybe wonder can show up. Maybe spontaneity could show up. And not even just the wonder and the spontaneity, but how do you react when things don't go according to how you thought it should, or how you think things should pan out? How well do you handle those kinds of changes and events? I see it all the time in weddings because there's so much energy that is directed on a wedding day because it's been planned for months and sometimes years, and there's been lots of money invested in this day. And so for the bride particularly, everything needs to go perfect. And how often does anything ever go perfect? Never. Sometimes it does. And so one of the weddings I had when I was in Kansas City, it was, everything was perfect. We did the rehearsal. It was all great. And then the bride shows up to get dressed, and the bridesmaids and everybody, but they didn't have the gown because the bridesmaids thought the bride had it, the bride thought the bridesmaids had it, everybody else thought, and it wasn't like an hour away was her house, and so we started the wedding an hour late so she could get the wedding dress. Another wedding that I did one time here in Seattle, the groom was so precise about every second. And he said, the wedding has to end at exactly a certain time. Okay, so everybody needs to arrive. We need to do this. We need to do that. And we went over and over and over this timeline. And we had it down. And I thought, all right, we're going to be here. We're going to do this. And we're waiting. And the bride didn't show up because one of her uncles drove these old cars, like 57 convertibles and stuff, and he was supposed to pick her up, only nobody ever told him he was supposed to pick her up, so she's waiting at home for him to come and, so we started an hour late on that one too. But the best one was in Reno when I was a minister there, and the whole party was like an hour late, and I'm like, where is everybody? We got to start this wedding, the guests are here, there's no bridal party. And finally, they came in, and the bride, as the bridesmaids were walking in, the seamstress was still sewing her dress. And I said, okay, now I've seen everything. And they go, we only need another 20 minutes. I'm like, no. She's coming down. Even if the dress is not finished, we're good. So, so it's true, isn't it, though? Like, we want everything to be perfect on certain days and certain times, and yet things are going to go wrong because that's just what they do, right? And how are we about letting go of control? When I was in Italy a couple of years ago, I was in control of the trip with my girlfriend because she didn't really use an iPhone and I did, and so whatever, I was the one who was scheduling where we were going, and she started complaining to me saying, you're awful controlling, we have to do this, and we have to catch a train here, and I said, fine, you know what I'm going to do? I'm letting go, I'm giving it to you, you figure out where we're going tomorrow, because we had no plans. So she said, I'll take control of it, and I said, good. So we got train tickets. Well, we got on I said, that's our train. No, this is our train. So we got on the train going in the wrong direction. I know this is a theme in my life, too, where I seem to get on the wrong trains going in the wrong direction. And she would just look at me and she'd say, but this is part of the experience. Isn't this fun? Only we had no seats because when we finally did get on a train, there was no seats. And I ended up sitting in between the cars in front of the bathrooms on the floor because there was no place. So I was not thrilled about that. I didn't practice what I'm talking about here today. And then we ended up in Milan and at the train station, only there were no trains, there were no buses, there were no cars to rent because it was like the World's Fair was happening in this town. And so we literally sat on the floor in the train station for, 6 or 7 hours trying to figure out how we were going to get out of Milan. And the thing that did happen in this was I ended up sitting next to a woman from the Philippines. And because we were just sitting there talking and having nothing else to do, she started to tell me her life story. She was in Italy as a servant, really. She was a maid. She took care of kids for this family while she had to send money home to her own family, and she never saw her own children. And it was such a sad story. It was so tragic, and yet I wouldn't have heard that story had we caught the right train. Now, did it change my life? No, but there was an exchange there and an awakening and an opening to me that I did not know, really. I mean, I know it exists, but when you're sitting with somebody as a girlfriend and you start talking about your life, something else came out of that. So letting go of control is a big issue for all of us. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm leaning into the third step in the 12-step program. So those of you who are in the 12-step program, the third step says to make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God, so to the higher power. And of course, the probably most famous prayer is the Serenity Prayer, isn't it? And how does it go? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that is a key spiritual principle. And the third step says that one needs to be willing to surrender. And sometimes that can be a scary thing because, again, we like to be in control, we don't like change, and we want to be able to call the shots. I love the way Tammi Baliszewski said it. She said, "Do you trust the universe? Do you think it's on your side? When you learn to surrender, when we learn to surrender, we open our minds to the notion that the animating force of the universe is love. And it feels so much better to relinquish the death grip on the steering wheel of life, to relax, and to slide over into the passenger seat. When we surrender, we invite and allow that something greater, God, the universe, creator, spirit, to take over the helm and guide us in the direction that is for our highest good." Do you believe that? And our Maundy Thursday service, which we're having next week, not this week, but next week, it's all about that. The entire service is geared toward inviting you to surrender your will to the will of God, because in that night we are walking the steps with Jesus as he surrendered his life in the Garden of Gethsemane, in which we just heard the song "In the Garden," yeah? So the whole service is about that. It's like, how do we surrender our will to Spirit? And we do that meditatively. We do that with communion. We do it with candle lighting, and with Andrea's going to have a sound singing bowls in the chapel. That's going to be our tomb that we walk to in that. So I invite you to come to that. So the truth is that letting go takes many forms, right? We've already talked about the letting go of control, letting go of our possessions. But what about friendships or people in your life that may no longer serve you? Have you ever had that experience where you find that, this kind of seems like a one-way street, like I'm the one who's always calling, or I'm the one who's putting out energy and not really getting a lot in return? Has that ever happened to you? And sometimes we find that those relationships then become draining. So do we not want life-enriching, life-giving relationships in our lives? And so sometimes that's what we need to let go of. And sometimes that's not such an easy thing to do. It's much easier to give away some of my possessions that I no longer want. And what about letting go of commitments that you have made that also no longer serve you or speak to your soul? And then there's the whole other issue of letting go and fasting from negative self-talk, right? Those thoughts that we hold that are not also for our highest good. So a question that I have for you is, can letting go of control lead to wonder? Can letting go of control lead to wonder? Because when we're kids, the truth is the world is filled with wonder, isn't it? I mean, everything's new. It's like, wow, I just got here. Everything's so amazing. And then you've been here a while, and it's like, yeah, been there, done that, got the t-shirt, know all about it. You know, as adults, we can become tired. We can become cynical if we're not mindful, yeah? If we're not willing to play. And how synchronistic that we're having a play shop this afternoon after brunch. So you can stay, you can eat, and give yourself an opportunity to play. Jesus said, unless you become as a little child, you can't enter the kingdom of heaven. And what is the kingdom of heaven? It's the expansion of consciousness, right? And so he's saying, hey, have a little wonder here. Be amazed. What was it that Dana read in the poem? We can live as if life is enchanted, or we can live as if it's like, it's the same old nothing. And it's all a matter of our perceptions and how we approach it. And play, having fun, those are life-giving experiences. When is the last time you played? Do you play enough, right? Do you get out there and just sort of let it be, I mean, we can be so responsible about life, and yet I was reading an article, because I'm serious about play, in Psychology Today, and it was talking about all this stuff about how, particularly if kids aren't given the opportunity to just sort of free-form play, which means make up the rules and make it up as we go along, that when they grow up as adults, they have less tolerance for anything, really. I mean, it just triggers all kinds of violence and stuff if they haven't learned to just sort of be and just sort of play and not be so serious and responsible all the time. And this is the season of wonder, is it not? I mean, look, we've already got so much more daylight, and it's coming back really fast. The days are starting to get longer again, and the spring equinox is this Tuesday. And again, it just marks the whole beginning of a new season. And the magic is there. The wonder is already there. We don't really have to work for it. Because really, if you think about it, when it's Christmas and stuff, we have to work for it, don't we? I mean, it's really dark. So, you know, we have Christmas and Hanukkah and the solstice, and we have all these candle lighting events and all these light events because we're working it. We're working to call in that light, and now we got it. We need to take advantage of it and to experience that wonder. It's like the song from John Fogerty where he says, "Beat the drum and hold the phone. The sun came out today. We're born again. There's new grass on the field," right? Anything is possible. There's new grass on the field. And I'm not just talking about baseball. So what does this have to do with letting go? The truth is, how can we experience anything new? How can we experience wonder if we're not willing to let go of what we think of how things should be and how things should look and how it all should unfold? Christine Valters Paintner said, "Broaden your vision for what you carry. What keeps you from the great adventure life is calling you to? What are the logical or practical explanations that get in your way? And what needs to be released to travel more lightly?" So I ask you this question. What is it that you feel that you are controlling right now in your life that you need to let go of? You just need to give it up. And what is the next great adventure that's calling you? So what do you need to say yes to? And I think I was going to have you break off into twos and talk about it, but we have a brunch, so we can have that as a topic of conversation downstairs. So just think about it for a moment. What is it? So first of all, what's the next great adventure? What is it that you need to say yes to in your life right now? And then what issue of control do you have that may be getting in the way of that? That you need to let go of that control so that you can step into that. Say yes. So again, there's two ways to live. One is if everything is enchanted, and the second is if nothing is. So let's put on those eyes of wonder. Let's put on those eyes of enchantment as we go throughout our day and see this beautiful world in which we live. And so as our musicians come forward, I'm going to lead you in a closing prayer. And part of that closing prayer is going to be our Lord's Prayer, because it's a brilliant prayer. And what is the second line? You know, thy will be done, right? So I'm going to invite you just to take a deep breath. And just exhaling is a process of surrendering and letting go. So breathing in again and exhaling. And so imagine that whatever it is that you think you have control of right now, we breathe and we exhale to that. And imagine handing the steering wheel over to God, to Spirit, to your higher power. let the universe drive this car. You don't have to hold on so tightly. You can release and you can let go, and all you need be is willing. And I invite you to say yes. Yes to the next great adventure in your life. Again, knowing that God is in charge, that Spirit is guiding you when we release and when we let go. And so join with me as we affirm our Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And leave us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.